You have been lied to about Mansa Musa. The internet claims he was worth $400 billion. It says he carried mountains of gold across the Sahara and single-handedly crashed Egypt's economy. For years, YouTubers and journalists looking for clicks repeated this same story until everyone accepted it as an absolute fact. But the moment you take a closer look at the actual medieval accounts, the whole illusion falls apart. The giant numbers have zero proof behind them, and the gold estimates just grew larger with every retelling. This is the true story of how centuries of pure gossip turned an ordinary West African king into history's richest man. In recent years, few historical figures have experienced internet fame like Mansa Musa. For decades, he remained a niche figure discussed almost exclusively by West African historians and academic specialists. That all changed during the 2010s when online history channels and viral content farms turned him into a global sensation. The internet discovered his story and immediately exploited it. Digital production companies desperately needed sensational historical clickbait to drive traffic, and an African ruler branded as the richest man in history became the perfect narrative, who completely eclipsed modern billionaires like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. The claim spread because it sounded perfect. It challenged stereotypes and surprised audiences, and most importantly, it generated clicks. If we look past the hype, nobody can actually explain how anyone calculated the net worth of a medieval monarch who died nearly 700 years ago. You know that modern billionaires leave digital paper trails, corporate stock listings, property valuations, and tax filings. But Mansa Musa left zero evidence of this kind. The Mali Empire produced virtually no internal, written administrative records regarding its treasury. Instead, historians have to reconstruct Mali's past using accounts written by foreign observers writing many decades after the king's death. This means the internet's favorite financial fact is actually based on text that is several steps removed from the original events. The further a story travels, the harder it becomes to separate fact from legend. Let's start with a fact that is true. Mansa Musa did rule over a kingdom that was rich relative to its time. During the 1300s, the Mali Empire occupied a strategic trading position in West Africa. It held absolute control over the highly lucrative trans-Saharan trade routes linking sub-Saharan Africa with the Mediterranean. If a merchant wanted to move salt, clothes, or ivory through the Sahara, they had to pay Mali first. But the real jackpot was the ground they stood on. Mali sat right on top of the legendary gold fields of Bambouk and Bour. We are talking about giant fields of gold right at the surface of the earth. It was so much wealth that it basically supplied the raw metal for every single gold coin used in Europe and the Middle East. During the Middle Ages, this surface-level, river-washed gold flowed steadily north into the Middle East and Europe. Gather it, workers didn't build advanced mine shafts. They literally just stood on riverbanks and used basic wooden pans to sift gold dust right out of the mud. That is an incredible historical reality. But there is a huge difference between finding gold and actually converting it into sustainable wealth. Sitting on top of rich natural resource deposits does not automatically mean a kingdom possesses a highly developed, resilient economy. History is packed with examples of resource-rich nations whose entire financial systems remained incredibly fragile because they relied solely on raw exports. The modern internet myth completely skips this economic nuance. Instead, it treats control of gold-producing regions as proof of limitless personal wealth. The historical evidence does not support that conclusion. Now, let's get to the part about why you should be skeptical of Mansa Musa's inflated net worth. One of the strangest aspects of the Mansa Musa legend is how little evidence actually exists. Most of what historians know comes from only a handful of writers. These included Ibn Battuta, Ibn Khaldun, Leo Africanus, and Ibn al-Umari. Without these men, much of the story disappears. That alone calls for caution when reading the viral infographics and simplified numbers repeated online. The internet presents Musa's specific net worth as an established, mathematically verified fact. In reality, the evidence rests heavily upon a few accounts produced by people who lived hundreds or thousands of miles away from Mali. Some of these scholars wrote generations after Musa passed away. Others relied on interviews and second-hand reports. That does not make them useless. But it does mean their accounts require careful scrutiny, especially when discussing something as difficult to measure as wealth. In fact, almost every single rumor these four men recorded can be traced back to a single historic journey. In 1324, Mansa Musa set out on his historic pilgrimage to Mecca, a holy journey known as the Hajj. For an Islamic ruler, this trip was part spiritual obligation and part geopolitical public relations opportunity. Musa did not travel to Mecca alone. He set out with a huge caravan that included servants, guards, officials, merchants, and attendants. Along with them came large amounts of gold. This wasn't a quiet journey. As the caravan moved across North Africa, it attracted attention wherever it went. Local rulers wanted to meet him. Merchants talked about him. Travelers carried stories of his wealth from one city to the next. By the time Musa reached Cairo, one of the largest and most sophisticated metropolitan hubs in the medieval world, his reputation had already begun to spread. This exact stopover in Egypt is where the modern internet myth was officially born. According to later Egyptian journal entries compiled in Cairo, Musa spent money with out-of-control generosity during his brief stay. He handed out gold dust as casual tips, showered local officials with expensive gifts, and paid top dollar for every luxury item he saw. But the problem was that most of these accounts focused on the spectacle rather than the numbers. People remembered the gold, the generosity, and the size of the caravan. What they did not leave behind were detailed records showing exactly how much gold Musa carried, or how much he spent. That gap in the evidence would later become the foundation of one of history's most famous myths. At first, the contemporary reports coming out of North Africa were relatively simple and grounded in reality. They basically stated, a wealthy West African king arrived in Cairo, gave away a lot of gold, and impressed the local sultan. But as the decades rolled by, the story began to travel. Because in medieval times, news moved slowly through traveling traders and oral storytellers, each person who repeated the tale naturally added their own layer of exaggeration. A large royal caravan slowly became a logistically impossible mega army, and the gold estimates grew larger with every single retelling. What started as a lot of gold became so much gold that it changed prices. Then it became so much gold that it broke the economy. Eventually, it turned into the richest man in history. And with each repetition, the story moved a little further away from what actually happened on the ground in 1324. But modern content creators don't care about how stories change over time. They want a spectacular headline. So, they took a centuries-old piece of gossip and turned it into a math problem to justify the famous $400 billion claim. But remember where this math actually comes from. Writing more than 50 years after the pilgrimage, the historian Ibn Khaldun recorded a rumor that Musa's caravan carried 80 loads of gold, with each load weighing roughly 150 kilograms. Modern content creators ran with this, multiplied the numbers, and declared that Musa carried exactly 12 metric tons of pure gold across the desert. But if you stop and think about the actual logistics, this figure completely collapses. For example, to carry 12 tons of raw gold across the Sahara, a caravan would need a staggering number of animals. A single camel can carry roughly 300 pounds of cargo. Transporting that much weight would require a line of 80 pack camels just for the gold itself. But those animals need food and water to survive the brutal desert heat. Every extra camel requires more supplies, which means adding even more camels to the caravan. The logistics multiply quickly, turning a 12-ton gold shipment into a miles-long supply chain across thousands of miles of sand. Anyway, back to the actual data. Economic historians have checked the actual financial records of the Mamluk Sultanate, a highly organized and powerful military empire ruling Egypt at that time. Professor Warren Schultz, a leading academic expert on medieval Islamic coins, analyzed Cairo's gold market data and discovered that the currency fluctuation during Musa's visit was entirely normal for that era. The value of Cairo's gold coin, the mythical, regularly dipped due to standard trade cycles and regional conflicts. Musa's flashy spending never actually destroyed the whole economy. It was just a short, normal change in a chaotic market. The dramatic idea that he broke an entire economy was completely invented centuries later to make the story sound better on paper. But there is a final piece of irony that viral articles completely hide. Ibn al-Umari's historical text actually explicitly records the highly embarrassing ending of Mansa Musa's grand vacation. According to the original 14th century documents, Mansa Musa completely ran out of money before his journey back to Mali even started. His reckless spending and total lack of understanding of foreign Mediterranean prices left his entire royal entourage completely stranded. The man the internet praises as a financial titan was actually forced to beg for heavy loans from Egyptian merchants. He had to accept high interest rates just to afford the long journey back home to West Africa. Infinitely wealthy king goes completely broke on vacation and takes out a predatory loan doesn't perform well on an algorithm. So media platforms completely erase this part from the story. This harsh reality matches exactly how Mansa Musa's own people felt and told about him. You see, pre-colonial African history didn't rely on foreign books or written documents. Instead, it was kept alive for centuries by griots. These griots were professional oral historians and storytellers who carried the true raw memories of kingdoms in their minds. When modern academic researchers went to West Africa to translate the traditional oral epics of the Mali Empire, they found something shocking. Local griots frequently refused to praise Mansa Musa in their historical songs and treated his memory with sharp disapproval. If you ask the descendants of the people who actually lived through his tax system, the fairy tale completely vanishes. They openly remember him as a careless and irresponsible monarch who put himself before his people. They saw a ruler who literally threw away the precious natural resources of his own homeland on a vacation. He did it all just to feed his own ego and hear foreigners cheer his name. To be honest, it feels like Musa traded the beating heart of Mali just to buy a moment of fame in Cairo. He chose his own spotlight over the survival of his people and literally gave away their future to strangers instead of protecting the very home that built him. The modern obsession with a fake net worth hides the real history. When the exaggerated numbers are put aside, the record shows a standard medieval ruler. He was a capable king, but he was not a legendary superhero. He performed the typical duties of a ruler for his era. He kept regional trade routes stable. He supported cities like Timbuktu and Gao. His administration funded local buildings, including the Jingreba Mosque, and brought scholars to the region. These were solid achievements, but they represent standard governance for a wealthy trading kingdom. The viral focus on a single statistic reduces a real empire into a financial meme. It replaces actual history with a sensationalized headline. Mansa Musa almost certainly ranked among the wealthiest rulers of his age. Few serious historians dispute that. The real debate concerns everything else. Was he the richest person in human history? That part is unlikely. Did he possess hundreds of billions of dollars? Nobody can prove it. Did he crash the economy? The evidence remains far weaker than popular retellings suggest. The actual lesson has little to do with gold. It concerns how history transforms into myth. A remarkable event occurred. Witnesses talked about it. Writers recorded it. Later generations expanded it. The internet amplified it. And eventually, a complicated historical figure became a simplified legend.